political science at the University of Liberia with Dr. Tape and the rest of them who taught me to prepare me for politics. So I did not just learn it, I also tried to experience it and participate in it. So I was about the late 20s, in my late 20s when I joined party. So I would love to be considered partisan, and also my training in law also allow me to participate and render my quota to Liberia, just like you and all other good Liberians, because as you said, Liberia is for all of us. Yes, so I want to be considered partisan, call me partisan, but for now I cannot be called partisan because my functions on the TRC makes it that I had to divorce myself of all political activities for now. But I do intend, with God's help, I shall continue after the TRC.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes. With that, you talk about, and I want to get the dates. You talk about the speech delivered to Mr. Kier's installation. Was that April 11, 1979 or April 11, 1980?
It was, yes, I think you're right. It was April 11, 1980, a day before the coup. You're right about that.
Yes. Okay. Also, you said that when you were talking about the realities of Mrs. Talbot, whether or not they she said that the political realities that she saw white hands, and you gave the political analysis on whether or not that could have been. And you also said in your mind it could have not been the Americans because they did not, or they do not operate in such manner when they want to overthrow, or remove someone from power or leader. That was buttressed with my question to Assistant Secretary of State Herman Cohen when we had the diaspora hearings in the United States. I asked him that it was rumored that the United States government was involved with Talbot's death, and he said no. So you also gave us a clear idea on the role of international actors in our civil crisis, which gave us even further lead. Did I understand you to say that Mr. Sally Thompson told you that, was it Papangida had put 1,000 soldiers on the ship to come to help Samuel Kanyando in 1980? Did I understand that? Well, I didn't get the African leader name.
Commissioner, let me start first with the question of Mrs. Talbot.
Yes.
Is by way of historical conjecture. I'm saying it is possible she didn't see white men. It was out of fear that she probably panicked and thought she saw white men. Then I said, let's assume for the sake of argument that she did see white men. It could have been Arabs. Mr. Talbot had involved himself in the Polisario issue. The Moroccans were very, very offended by that. There are serious things happen. Yeah, leaders have been eliminated for lesser things. And so I did say, probably we have to look at other forces. Now, let me say here, why I'm not convinced that the Americans were involved. You see, and I say we can label this chapter in our history, political opportunism and change in a West African society. I saw the Americans there the day after the coup. I could see that they didn't know these people. They had gone to establish contact. One. Number two, the first sets of arms we got were AK-47. The Liberian army had been using guns from America. Number three, Doe made a trip to Ethiopia. Samuel Doe made a trip to Ethiopia. I was Minister of Education, and I accompanied him on that trip. When we got to Ethiopia, Mengistu Haile Mariam, the young leader of Ethiopia, had made a statement that in the revolutionary process one has to be decisive. Because I remember we had a meeting at 8 o'clock to go to a military base. And I was outside when Mengistu came with his group. He arrived at 5 minutes to 8. He got off his car waiting. And by 8:15, Samuel Doe had not come down. So Mengistu said to one of his people, "Can you go and see what Mr. Doe is doing?" So the security man went upstairs and came back. When he came back, he said, "He's getting ready." And when Doe came down, about 35 minutes later, Mengistu said, in the revolutionary process, one has to be decisive because the revolution does not wait for anybody. And we all got in the car and left. Now, Doe understood that differently, completely. So when we got to Liberia, I think the next thing he did was to give order for the elimination of A.B. Toba and Vani themselves. Bitter. But what is so interesting about that was that the Americans were trying to find out what Doe had learned, what commitment had Doe made in Ethiopia. They found nobody to come and consult. Oh, Mom, thank you. I don't drink soft water. I don't drink this. I'm trying to get rid of the poison. You know, excuse me. No, when I mean poison, at my age, it's good to keep out of soft drinks, and the metabolism is not very fast like young children. So I drink water. As I was saying, the Americans were very eager to know what Doe was up to, what he had done in Ethiopia, what commitments he had made. And they saw nobody to send but a black American sister who was working at USAID, called Eugene Lucas. I know she was an agent, so of course she came to see me and wanted dinner. She wanted dinner. And to discuss, and I said to her, well, you know, at that age, I said, I'm not in the habit of refusing dinner from pretty women, but I know who you are, and you know who I am. What is it? And she said, our embassy is keen to know. And the questions at dinner that night, the questions she asked me, I was convinced that the Americans were not in control. I mean, they did not even know who Samuel Doe was. She asked me, was he impressed by Marxism? Was he impressed by this whole idea of the Russians? Was he convinced that Ethiopia? And I said, but how could he have been impressed with anything to do with socialist revolution? For most of the time, the man wore American Texas cowboy boots and cowboy hat. Doe did not go there to see a revolution. He only went for a visit. I said, tell your Americans to stop this thing. Let them stop worrying. Doe is not going anywhere. He doesn't understand. So we can only push for an elections. And based on that, I think they agreed. So, you know, the little I know, after having read about a little bit about the Vietnamese Revolution, the Diem brothers, after having read about the activities of the Americans in Latin America, in Asia, having read about the Iranian Revolution of Dr. Mossadegh and the movement of the British and Americans to overthrow him or the control of Iranian oil, the little I know about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the various plots against Ahmed Sékou Touré, the various plots and attempts to overthrow the government of Cuba. The Americans don't act this way. They won't send a little known Samuel Doe and 6 or 7 unknown men to go and assassinate a president in a country where they had strategic interests? No. But when it happened, they made sure they were in the position to take control of the situation and exploit the situation to, one, stabilize the country, to protect their interests. And this is why I'm yet to be convinced of the historical records that the Americans had anything to do with what happened in Liberia on April 12th. I could be wrong. History could prove me otherwise. But so far, all the records I've seen, all the books I've read, the letters I've read, I'm not convinced. And they could have taken some other person. They would have taken some other person. And let me tell you what they did in Chile. That is what they did in Chile. They were not satisfied with the popular unity government of the Dr. Salvador Allende. So the first thing they did was to make sure that they could strangle the economy. They made it difficult when middle class and upper class women came on the streets of Santiago with shining pots. Shining pots. I was a young student in America, and I said 100 people don't knock shining pots. But they came on the streets, and after that, there was a General Snyder, who was very committed to democracy, who was in favor of the popular unity government of Allende. He was assassinated. General Snyder was assassinated. And then General Pinochet led the coup against Salvador Allende. This is the modus operandi of the Americans as far as I know. So why would they want to gamble with a Samuel Doe? They did not know, did not understand, did not interact with him sufficiently. You know, to make progress in any struggle, you must first understand those on the other side. And let me frighten certain people. I think it was Chemomao who said, "Tell no lies, scream no easy victory." We must not claim that we know about the Americans. We don't. We don't.
Dr. Fahnbulleh, now that you've put it correctly that April 11, 1980, you gave the speech at a university with the election of George Kerr. Could you tell me, let's go back to what was the nature of that speech, because the nationalists telling them to be nationalists. Could you just give us maybe the topic and what was the nature again? Make sure.
I think what it had to do something with our own commitment to change. It was the induction of young men. And of course I had to talk to the militants of SUP. And so the whole thing was to rally around the banner of nationalism and to support these brothers. And that I said that we are here and we are going to struggle as much as possible. At that time, the PDP people were in prison. And so I was saying that we're going to struggle. We're going to move forward. Irrespective of what has happened, we will not stop our march for freedom and democracy. Basically, I think that was the speech. But you can read it. Like I say, you can just get my book and read that. You'll get an understanding.
Okay, thank you. We'll take note of that. Considering the conversation between you and Barkas Matthew on 1979, would you, I got the impression Barkas, he said, brought out for solidarity, there would be a march for rights. The rights demonstration had been called, and he said that he engaged the people to come out that night. He said, y'all sat on the grave. You wanted to know what the itinerary was. And he said, we were sent by the headquarters, make slogan and march. And you said, what if they open fire? And he said, we will bring alcohol and banish. So you told Fahnbulleh to Sawyer, this man is a reckless gambler or does not know what he's doing. So in terms of this, how would you consider Barkas Matthew a man of non-violence or what? Because, you know...
I'll put it this way. I think, to be frank with you, Matthews was one of those revolutionaries who had been trained by the system. There was a gentleness about him. I guess he realized the risk. And for a moment, I thought he believed passionately in the Constitution. He felt that I was exaggerating, that these people will not shoot. I think the whole idea about alcohol and ban aid was simply meant to say to me, Fahnbulleh, don't bring these alarmist tactics. And he was convinced, because you see, Bacchus had this thing with Talbot. He met with them, he talked with them, etc. And he was convinced that there's no way they were going to give orders to shoot people. He felt it was going to be one of those things where they will get to his party headquarters, they will shout the slogans, and then they will disperse. And for him, that would be enough political capital. If the Talbot government backed down and did not increase the price of rice, the man who will gain the most will be Bacchus Matthews. So Bacchus was going out for numbers. He was being tactical. I mean, in this sense, he was a tactician. That this is what the people are saying out there. And Moja, you are analyzing this thing beautifully. But the people want to see some action. So when he said to us, and you have in the back was, because when I met him, and he said, well, we're going forward with the demonstration. When we met that night representing Moja, we said to him, so we've reached the stage, because we were getting intelligence reports that the oligarchy was going to come to teach people sense. There was a sister I knew who was a nurse, and she had phoned me at my house and said, do you know they are transferring blood from the blood bank into the main hospital? It was with this knowledge that I went to the meeting in the graveyard. And that's what I asked him the question, which appeared hypothetical. I didn't reveal what I heard. I said, but Bacchus, if they should start shooting, and he didn't believe it. And they did start. People did die. And I think he was just as shocked. And that's what I asked the commissioner to go back and read Albert Port's beautiful pamphlet, The Day Moravia Stood Still. It is a beautiful illustration of his own frustration in convincing the Talbot regime not to open fire. By all means, to allow these people to assemble. And I was told by by Deacon Kala when I went there that morning. So here we are. Here we are. Where do we go? He said everybody's gone in hiding. They will come later. At 3 o'clock, we're going to meet here, shout some slogans. We're in touch with Mr. Port, and we'll disperse. They were not given the opportunity. They were not given the opportunity. And so, as the Americans say, the rest is history.
Your maybe good friend was Shaka Stephen or President Momo, who said to you that the people say that you are worse than Taylor. I tried to find my quotation as I wrote down. Stephen said, yes, Shaka Stephen said to you, the people say you are more dangerous than Taylor. How do you I need a response from you on that.
Certainly, it's very easy. I think what the old man was saying, based on all intelligence report, there were a group of Liberians who were supporting Taylor. These people had access to elements of the Black Congressional Caucus. And they were saying to the Black Congressional Caucus, you see, Taylor has been to Libya. There's no problem. He's our man. We can handle him. The dangerous man is Fahnbulleh. You know, he's a communist. He's a communist, and for old man Stevens that would be very dangerous. He knew me as a young militant at Fahnbulleh College. But to be told by people, especially a major power, that Fahnbulleh is dangerous, he's a socialist, he's a left-wing, he's a communist. And he said, but they say you are dangerous. And I said to him, no sir, the people who are purveying this falsehood, the people who are propagating this are obviously trying to demonize me. They want the support of the Americans. They feel I can mobilize people sufficiently. They don't want me. They know my politics. Now we have been told by Mr. Coe and other people that decision was taken to support Taylor. And I was called to the American embassy and asked whether I saw a role for myself in Taylor's government. But here is the contradiction. Here's the contradiction. If I was that dangerous and a left-wing agitator, why put me in a Taylor's government when he was right-wing? Except you wanted to eliminate me. So I saw no role for myself. In terms of being dangerous, that is what they mean. It simply meant that I was ideologically inclined. And I tell people that. I started off by saying, I am a disciple of the late Kwame Nkrumah. I remain a disciple of Kwame Nkrumah. I remain committed to militant Pan-Africanism. That is my philosophy. I follow Nyerere. I follow Nkrumah. I follow, if you like, Joe Slovo, Chris Hani. I follow revolutionaries in Africa. I'm a disciple of Gamal Abdel Nasser. My last son is called Gamal Boima Fahnbulleh. I'm a sympathizer of these people. I like the politics. They educate me. It's a politics geared towards the upliftment of the masses. I have not hidden that. I will not hide that. I will be dishonest to say to the Liberian people that if you ever support me, I will keep the system as it is. I will transform the system. I told the Americans that. I believe in transformation. I have seen that it's possible in other countries. People talk about Tanzania. Nyerere, when he died, Tanzania had the highest rate of literacy in the whole of Africa, 95%. Look at your country. You can drive 5 miles into certain areas of this country. If you have an accident, you are a dead body. There's not a single clinic. The Cubans have thousands and thousands of doctors. Are you afraid to ask the Cubans for 500 doctors to send to the rural areas? You know, one thing I've never hidden from the Americans is my politics of nationalism. I will never do that. And I guess I respect them because they know who I am. It would be a disservice to myself, to those who died and who believe in me. And I remember quite well after 1979 when I convinced myself that this struggle must continue. A little boy of 14 came to me on Broad Street. I'd just come from prison. He said, Dr. Fahnbulleh, hello. I said, how you do? He said, my brother, 18 years old, died. I said, what happened? He was shot by the police during the rights demonstration. I put my hand on his head and said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, Dr. Fahnbulleh, my brother was at that Moja rally when you said the African people are their own liberators. He believed in you.
The African people were the only one?
The African people are their own liberators.
Are the only liberators. Are their own liberators. The African people are their own liberators, right? Yes. Well, you do, we repeat it because sometimes we don't understand it and it's going far and wide. So people...
Why? Let me explain to you.
I didn't understand it.
It's a matter of consciousness building. It's a matter of consciousness building. The African people must realize that they have a great history of resistance. A great history of resistance. In the time of slavery, there was a rebellion of somebody called Nactona, a black slave. In Haiti, there was a black man called Toussaint Louverture who revolted against the French. All over Africa during the time of liberation, black people were struggling. What we tried to do at that rally was to say, don't wait for anybody to come and free you.
Come up and get up.
They will not come. You as men and women with consciousness, you will have to decide to free yourself. Take your destiny into your own hand. Demand equal rights in this country. That's what we mean when we say the African people are their own liberators. It has been proven since the struggle for independence. Who liberated Guinea-Bissau? The peasants, workers, and intellectuals of Guinea-Bissau under Amilcar Cabral. Who liberated Angola? The peasants, workers, students, and intellectuals of Angola under the leadership of the MPLA, headed by Dr. Agostino Neto, who liberated Mozambique. The peasants and workers and intellectual students